Good evening. Welcome to Progressive Soup. My name is David Stevenson. I'll be tonight's host. And with me I have Lynn Tabersack and Carl Tischler. And we're going to be discussing the Unitarian Universalist Church and immigration. First of all, I'd like to have you explain what the church is involved in terms of the immigration issue.
Well, Carl and I are both longtime members of the Church's Social Action Committee, and I think every religious denomination either has a mission committee or a social action committee, and we really try to find issues involving social justice to get involved in. And this issue really came to us. We didn't have to go out and look for it.
Well, certainly within Danbury, you know, we've had a long history of immigration going back to the 70s with the Southeast Asian populations. Prior to that, a grand history of Portuguese people coming to America and settling into Danbury. But for some reason, the groups that we have that have come from South America and Central America, the attitudes and the process seems to have been very much different than the process and attitudes that arrived on our shores and in Danbury with other groups. How do you see the difference? What is the difference, and where do you think that comes from?
Well, I think in Danbury that the immigration issue was hijacked for political reasons.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Danbury was looking for a scapegoat. Why weren't things working? Why were jobs moving away? Why was the economy, going down the tubes? Why wasn't the area thriving? And there were people in elected office who would point the finger down to Kennedy Park and say, "That's the problem. These are the people who are responsible for all of your troubles." I think through history, bad politicians have always tried to find scapegoats to blame every kind of social ill on.
Could I draw a parallel in any way between what the church, what the Universal Unitarian Church is, Unitarian Universalist Church is doing in order to protect these Americans in training, if you will, mm-hmm. with the way people in the North protected and assisted slaves leaving the South while the United States still had two separate unions, helping those slaves as they made their trip from slavery to freedom in Canada.
Well, you could draw that parallel, but I think there's a better parallel, and obviously our congregation joined the New Sanctuary movement, and we find the closest parallel to that was the first sanctuary movement, which was in the...
It was in the 80s.
1980s.
Yeah, during, when the people were being subject to violence during, the uprising, the Contras, in Nicaragua and in El
mm-hmm.
Salvador. And so that they needed to escape persecution. But there is a difference in the sense that the New Sanctuary movement is not explicitly helping people who necessarily are fleeing, violence or persecution. But there are people who have just come, perhaps for all kinds of reasons, to our country, and who are just trying, to work within the system to make a better life for themselves. And we just want to expose that to people, put a human face on the situation and what's happening.
Now, it seems like immigration laws are very different nowadays than, for instance, when my father's parents came from Ireland. So I'm third generation Irish American. But it seems to be that when other groups have come to America throughout our history, they've been greeted maybe not in a friendly fashion, maybe not treated well, but at least they were allowed to immigrate here, absorb the harshness of being low man on the totem pole, so to speak, in terms of jobs, and not be denied the opportunity to become Americans. Do you see this as being, is there being any difference between what's happening now in immigration laws from past generations?
Well, the immigration system is broken now.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that for Someone who is here with a permanent residence visa, it would take them about 70 years to get a family member to come here. Something's wrong when our immigration system can't respond to family reunification, can't respond to needs that are in the labor force. So that's completely different from the way it was when our grandparents came. Absolutely. There's no argument there.
Very much so. And then my wife's parents emigrated from Czechoslovakia in the 1920s. And they basically, since they had a family member here, they basically got off the boat at Ellis Island and pretty much almost flew through the system in order to be reunited with their family members. And that's very different than what's happening now. Why?
Well, I don't think we can go into the why. I think we can say that we hope there's a new administration in Washington. We think that they can fix this. We think that there's probably enough of a consensus among both Democrats and Republicans that we have to do immigration reform, that we have to make it work. We have to resolve the issues of making a legal path to citizenship for the 12 million immigrants who are here now, and then going forward with ways to meet labor market needs, to have good enforcement at our borders, and to make sure that people are able to come here legally. The reason they come here illegally, aside from wanting to have a better life, is that there isn't a legal way to come to this country from Central and South America.
I have a sense from a lot of people that are on our side of this issue that there's a tremendous amount of moral outrage because of the way immigrants are treated now. Do you sense that?
I think we see evidence of that when we see newspaper reports about immigrants in detention who die because they don't get medical treatment. I think we saw it in Danbury with the immigration arrest of Teresa Pereira in front of her 2 children, of her being taken away after being in this country for 27 years, hardworking, paying taxes. I think people express outrage about families being broken apart and about people in our custody dying because they don't get the medical care that they need. But this is all going a little bit far afield from our congregation and our decision to join the New Sanctuary Movement and the kinds of things we've been trying to do in Danbury. That's the whole point of our vote in, when did we vote? What year? It was 2008?
It was a little over about a year and a half ago.
A year and a half ago.
Yeah, so
that we wanted to make a difference right here in our community, because this is where the problem of immigration was touching our lives.
So expound upon what the New Sanctuary is.
Well, I'll talk a bit about that. I mean, the idea is that we want to bring at a very personal level the situation of particular immigrants who are struggling to get into this, to become legal citizens, and for whatever reason they've not been able to, or they're subject to an order of detention, in order to get it pushed out of the country, and they've done no crime or any other thing other than they're not able to work within the system to get in. And the New Sanctuary Movement is a nationwide movement. There's been several congregations, not just Unitarian Universalists, but many different denominations have been looking at it and have joined. It came to our attention because of the particular situation that was happening in Danbury, where, particularly the Danbury 11 case, where there were these 11 day laborers who had been working Kennedy Park and were picked up under, basically under false pretenses by ICE, and then taken to prisons, hundreds of miles away. And again, they had done nothing other than look for work, and they were separated from their families and subject to expulsion. And that, seeing that those individuals, hearing their story, really made that real for many people in our congregation, and made us decide to move and to work to join the New Sanctuary Movement.
I suspect that a lot of people in our audience probably have heard of ICE, but probably don't have a lot of depth of knowledge about what it evolved out of and what its purpose is. Could you enlighten us on that?
Yeah, well,
No.
well, I can give a bit of a, I mean, originally there was just Immigration and Naturalization Service, so the emphasis was on naturalization, on bringing people into the country. With the move toward the Department of Homeland Security, it became Immigration and Customs Enforcement. So the emphasis essentially was changed to, quote-unquote, enforcing the law, but essentially enforcing immigration law and finding ways to meet quotas, to get, to make a certain number of arrests to get immigrants out of the country. And it was not a matter of, in our mind, of combating crime, or even as they try to link it with terrorism. It was just justifying the existence of this department, and that's what happened.
And I think that we could both assure everyone in Danbury that there are no terrorists in Kennedy Park.
I think that's safe to say, because I'm by there frequently enough to see that there are folks that are just there looking to make enough money to establish themselves here, perhaps to send a little money back, very much like the process was generations ago. You come to America, you work hard, you send a little money back to your country where generally the standard of living is not as good as it is here in America for any of a number of reasons. In my case, my family's case, the potato famine and the what happened after that. But to send a little money back to keep them alive and healthy while you establish a way to get the rest of the family here and, again, become Americans in training. Now, I know that there are a lot of programs in Danbury that are set up to assist people that are in that process with things like learning English and other types of other ways of assimilating into American society. Would you like to talk about that a little bit?
Well, I can describe what we've been doing since we joined the New Sanctuary Movement, because there really isn't enough going on to help immigrants assimilate. I think that everyone knows that the Hispanic Center was defunded by the City of Danbury. They've gone through 2 executive directors since then. So the primary agency that was serving Latino or Spanish-speaking people in the community has had a rough couple of years. But one of the things we did as part of the New Sanctuary Movement was we put together these info kits. And they're all in Spanish. Actually, we've done some in Portuguese, but for instance, this one has a flyer that tells people, come to a class for workers, learn about workers' rights. And we put these info kits, they're in a little container like this, we put them in areas around the downtown area where immigrants are likely to go. I think you mentioned that immigrants send money home. They do. They're remittances. And you'll see all along Elm Street, all along White Street, these signs, Rio, envíos de dineros. People are sending money. So they'll go in and they'll see these info kits, and it could be something as simple as how you protect yourself from immigration enforcement, how to send money to another country, how to open a bank account. In every kit, for instance, there's a claim for wages. A big problem with day laborers in Danbury since the economy turned sour is that they're working for local contractors and not being paid. And they need to file a claim for wages with our labor department in order to try to get those payments. So we got kits with lots of good information. We actually also developed a guide to free and low-cost medical care in Danbury. I know a lot of people think that immigrants are entitled to all kinds of social benefits, and they aren't. So we have prepared a guide to show them where they can get help if they are sick. I certainly don't want people to have like infectious tuberculosis and not be treated, because that will impact all of us.
You know, I'm noting that that on the handouts that you have for these immigrants, presumably they're able to read in their native language.
Yes.
So they're educated people that we're talking about.
They're not well-educated people. Often they aren't.
We're going to break for a public service announcement, and then we'll be right back.
Explore her grandeur. Appreciate her beauty. Protect her for tomorrow. We all share the responsibility for protecting nature and preserving the environment for future generations. You can help by recycling your old rechargeable batteries. Call 877-2RECYCLE or visit us online at calltorecycle.org to learn where you can recycle your old rechargeable batteries. Please, answer the call to recycle.
Welcome back to Progressive Soup. I'm David Stevenson. I have with me Lynn Tabersack and Carl Tischler, and we're talking about the issues that surround immigration in Danbury. Now, I noted while we were away that I have a friend who's bilingual. He speaks both English and Spanish, and he teaches English and speaking and writing of English to immigrants who have worked a full-time job, sometimes longer than a full-time job, and then at the end of the day, they still have enough energy and enough desire to want to attend these classes and learn to speak English and learn to write in English, and they're doing everything that they can to become American citizens or to work ultimately towards that goal. Now, what was else you wanted to talk about?
Well, some of the other things that we're doing, we did hold a resource fair in March, the very end of March, at the Brazilian Catholic Center right downtown. And we got many of the social service agencies and community agencies in Denver to come so that immigrants could walk through and really find out an awful lot of stuff that they need to know. For instance, the Danbury Public Library was there. They have a wonderful language lab in the basement that immigrants can use. Immigrants, regardless of their status, can get a card at the Danbury Public Library. The HART, the Housatonic Area Regional Transit District, was there with route maps. They say that now in Danbury, 60% of their ridership is non-English speaking. They want to do outreach to these groups. And you know that you can't get a driver's license in Connecticut if you don't have any kind of documentation, so they're going to be using the bus service. So that was a very successful event. Beside that, we've tried to get the congregation to do some things as individuals. We have lobbied all of our representatives in Congress because we have folks who live in Reading and Ridgefield. We have the 4th and the 5th Congressional District. We've lobbied both of our United States Senators on immigration control. We have a weekly food offering at our services. Every Sunday people bring things in and we have a list. And the primary food stuffs that are in Latino diets. People bring in rice, they bring in dry beans. And it's little things, it's big things. It's reaching out to people in Kennedy Park. We have volunteers who go once a week and serve coffee. We flyer for these classes that are downtown once a month. So there's a lot of back and forth and trust building and trying to speak to them in their own language and create those relationships. So I think we're doing a lot to help with the assimilation. It'd be wonderful if the entire community put their shoulder to that wheel.
I've had a lot of conversations over the years with Mayor Mark Boughton about immigration particularly, because he and I have some very different opinions about immigration. What should be the responsibility, in your opinion, of government in interceding, in being a part of, the immigration issue?
Well, I think that a few things have to be clear in any city. You have to accept that day laborers have the right to solicit work on a public street. And we have to get over that. I'd like to see our city government try to solve that. I know they had big plans for the downtown because there was going to be a deluxe condominium development built near the Pulse Point, and they did want to relocate the day laborers, but our municipal leaders have dropped that ball, and they have not gone to for instance, a day laborer center, which might work very well, in that people could be hired in a more judicious fashion instead of seven guys rushing to a car where they need one person who's good at stonework. You can find out what people's skills are and try to match them, but I don't see that happening too soon. What I'd like to see is an end to the harassment of day laborers at Kennedy Park, and a change in public attitudes about immigrants in our community. I think we need to give them the benefit of the doubt that they are here, they do contribute, they work awfully hard, they do jobs that most Americans wouldn't go near with a 10-foot pole. And they're not criminals, and they're not terrorists, and you know, a change in attitude would be great at the municipal level. I'm not expecting it to happen tomorrow.
I guess we expect our leaders to lead, and if I'm hearing what I think I'm hearing, if they did lead the way and did behave in a more decent and respectful and moral fashion towards these citizens in training, then probably the employers that that come down and sometimes, as you say, sometimes make them work and then don't pay them, maybe they would behave differently if our governmental leaders set a better example.
I would just add that it's part of the situation is not just from the point of view of what the government, but it's public attitudes and stereotypes that are being perpetuated. And I guess it's easy for any government official or whatever to try to jump on a bandwagon and try to demonize a group if they think it will serve them well. What we're trying to do is just to say these are human beings, who are here, who are doing, and they have families and they have situations which they're living through that perhaps are not as visible or we don't see it in the media. And by just humanizing it, by hearing, like as we had in our education process leading up to our vote to join, we had basically families come in and describe their situation, what their fear of living in the fear of being asked to leave or being subject to deportation, having their family split up, and their inability to work within the system, and and having to be careful what they do, and not being able to go and do just do what we take for granted as being citizens.
There's been a lot of talk about the extra stress put on our school systems with children of immigrants coming here and being ESL, English as a second language. But in every crisis, it affords us certain opportunities. And I've seen situations in some of our local schools where they've paired up a non-English speaking student with an principal English speaking student, and allow them to buddy up, so to speak, and do a little trading off as far as language skills. And it gives the principally English-speaking students, somebody whose family's been here a long time, an opportunity to learn a little bit of not just culture but language of the country where the student, the foreign ESL student came from. But they trade off. One learns the English better, and the other one learns a foreign language a little bit better, to the betterment of both, I think.
I think it's very telling that it is just a generation that it takes for those children who are coming into kindergarten as ESL students to be leaving in the 12th grade with high honors. We had a young man who spoke to our congregation during our education process, Tiago Lima, who graduated from Danbury High School this June with high honors. It's Teresa's son. He not only graduated with honors, he was an athlete at Danbury High School. it does not take these kids long. We have a good public education system, and they do fit in, and they can excel. And I think if you look at many of the top students, especially at Danbury High School, where we have a lot of diversity and we pride ourselves on it, you're going to see children from every country on the face of the earth doing very well.
As we've noted in past generations, certainly people from wherever they come from do add a lot to our culture. And as you say, they assimilate quickly, they want to become Americans as quickly as possible. And
they want to be accepted.
Yeah. It just seems to be the right, just, and moral thing to do to welcome them in and help them in whatever way is necessary, the same way that our ancestors were helped when they first came here.
So we hope there's some movement on immigration reform, and we hope we can be part of that, because there's obviously going to have to be folks in every community who help people legalize their status, whether it's at the Danbury Public Library, or whether it's at the PAL Center, or whether it's at the Portuguese Cultural Center. But they're going to need to have advocates, so we have a leg up on that. We've been advocating.
Yeah. You had mentioned about the library cutting back on its programs. I'm sure that's had somewhat of a detrimental effect on all these programs that emanate out of the Danbury Library. We've got about a minute left.
I'm sure it has. I'm glad that they've restored some of the hours, but it will be fully used.
Well, the library, in fact, I think has become, we kind of got away from using the library over maybe the last 10 or 20 years, and now it seems like the library, with the decline of the economy, the library has become the place to congregate again, because it's a less expensive alternative to doing a lot of other things.
Yeah, that's very true.
So with that, I think we're going to wrap up this show, and we'll pick it up again at another time. Thanks very much. This is David Stevenson, Progressive Soup, Lynn Tabersack, and Carl Tischler. Thank you.